Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to New Vegas, where today we're going to be ranking every single weapon in Fallout New Vegas on our tier list here. I've done this with every single video going into great detail, and I've made all of them into compilations. Originally, I was planning on just pushing them all into one giant compilation and putting it up. Then I realized how long that would be, and it would be about 17 hours or so, roughly. So I'm going to try to make it a little bit more digestible in this video. And also that video would have been like massive. It would have been like 300 gigs and then I would have had to compress it and it just would have taken forever to upload. So let's begin with this. We're just going to briefly go over these weapons. I have various different types of weapons, whether it be the regular weapons, modified weapons, or the unique versions of the weapons, and we'll talk about each of them. Not going over their direct stats. If you would like to see that, go to any of the compilations or go to any of the particular videos. So this one will be kind of a sped up version of that. So first up, we have the 357 Magnum. This one you can actually sneak into places, which is pretty cool. This one you can get right at the very start in Good Springs. You can get the mods for it right away too. It uses a 357 round. It is a gate loading revolver, which means its reloads are pretty slow. It actually has pretty good damage on it, and if you get the Cowboy perk, it's pretty decent. But it does fall off compared to the other revolvers, and it is really awkward, especially with a low agility character, since that affects your reload speed. So this one I think I'm going to put into D tier. It's not really one of the strongest handguns, but it's not a terrible handgun either. With the mods on it, it actually does get quite a lot better. The mods make it so you get a better cylinder, which gives it more health, and then it becomes one of the most durable revolvers. And it also has a longer barrel, which gives it more damage, which is pretty nice. There is another unique advantage the 357 revolver has, and that is that it can't jam, unlike most other weapons. Even at extremely low durability, this one cannot jam, so that is pretty good. Kind of makes sense for a gate loading revolver like that. Either they don't jam at all, or if they're jammed, yeah, you're not getting it open unless you take the whole gun apart. So yeah, this one much better. I'd put this one up into C tier. I think it's actually a pretty decent handgun overall. Then we got Lucky, arguably one of the coolest looking handguns in Vegas, one of the coolest looking handguns ever. It has a really cool color scheme. You can get this one right at the start too. If you go to the Steve Bison Hotel, you just have to pick a lock to get it. It is a hard lock, so you're going to need to have 75 lock picking to get it. But this one has more damage, has more durability, at least than the regular 357. Not as much as the modded, I think. This one does have a higher crit chance. 357 rounds are pretty easy to get, and this weapon is great. It's also a sneak-in weapon, so this one's going to go right up into A tier. The only downside this one has is still the slow reload speed, but it does reload faster than a standard 357, so it's actually pretty good. 44 Magnum's up next, and this one's pretty good too. You can get this one somewhere towards the mid-game. Fiends tend to have it. This one does pretty high damage per shot. It's got a good bullet. You can actually get the unique bullets for it that you would be able to get from the handloader perk just normally, so long as you pass a survival skill check, I believe, up north in the top part of Vegas. You just got to talk to a guy around there. And this one actually has a lot of item health too. Does good damage, is affected by the Cowboy perk, which is pretty nice. The mods on it are pretty easy to get a lot of the time. The Gunrunners and like Crimson Caravan tend to sell them. This is also a sneak-in weapon if you have 50 sneak, so this one is one of the most powerful handguns that you can actually sneak in. This one all around is a pretty decent handgun. It also reloads quick. It's not a gate loading handgun, it's just a swing out cylinder, so this one's nice. I believe I had this one set into B tier, which I'm going to probably keep it there. It is better than the 357. Probably not as good as Lucky though. At least normally. The modded version I would actually put up into A tier though, because the modded version you can put two mods on this. You can have the better frame, which makes it so it's the most durable handgun in the game, which is really good. And you can also put a scope on it. Scope is your choice if you want to throw it on there or not. Usually I find the frame pretty easily on this, and I actually like the frame on this quite a bit. I think it actually looks really good. This one's a very nice, powerful handgun. It feels really good. Mysterious Magnum, also going to go up into A tier. This one's really nice. This one does high damage. It's really cool when you can pull this one out and it plays the music, and you put it away and it plays the music. You can get this one on the side of the road. Either if you kill the Lonesome Drifter, reverse pickpocket it from him, or you can get him a job at the top, so then you pass a barter check and he'll give you the Mysterious Magnum. This one doesn't have as much item health as a regular 44, but it does do more damage and has just higher stats all the way around. So this one's really nice too, and you can also sneak this one in. It also just looks so cool. I love the way this one looks. And then we got the 45. This is the 1911 that you get in Zion. You can buy this from Joshua or from Daniel. You can occasionally get this from a couple other people that have it, usually in Zion. And once you leave Zion, you can buy this from a bunch of different vendors. This one's pretty good overall. The regular 1911 is actually pretty decent. I think I'm going to put this one into C tier. I think it's pretty decent. It's not one of the strongest handguns. It does get good with mods, and the mods are always available, so I always have a modded version of this. but I don't think it's quite as strong as some of the other guns we've already talked about. The modded version, I would put a tier higher. That one's up into B tier. That one's pretty good. You can get a suppressor on it and a stronger slide, so it has a lot more item health. It doesn't break that quick. It is the strongest handgun that you can sneak in with a suppressor, so that's really cool, especially if you want to go with like a hitman build. This one's really nice. It's also affected by the grunt perk, so if you want to take that one, you can get even more damage thanks to the 1911s. You can do the same thing with the 9mm, which we'll talk about here in a second. Yeah, this one's really good. Light Shining in Darkness is Joshua's pistol, and this one's going all the way up into S tier. This one shoots so fast, reloads so quick. It doesn't hold quite as many rounds as the regular 45, which already doesn't hold that many shots, but you can sneak this into areas. It has such high DPS. It's one of the strongest handguns in the game. It is legitimately really, really good. I know not everybody likes the trench sight that it has. They would rather have the standard 1911 sights, which I understand. But, I mean, it's so cool. And a lot of the time I'm just hip firing this. I'm not, like, ADSing with it too much. Then we've got the 5.56 pistol. This is introduced in the Gunner's Arsenal DLC. This one is a revolver, but this one is not affected by the Cowboy perk. I think this is the one that's not affected by the Cowboy perk. I'm pretty sure that gun isn't affected by it, which is weird since this is in the base game and it is a revolver. But the 5.56 pistol you can just buy from vendors. It's pretty common. The 5.56 ammo is super versatile, which is great. This is an homage to the Blade Runner revolver, which, I mean, looks pretty cool. This one's actually quite nice. This one's actually probably going to go up into B tier, just because the 5.56 ammo is so common and there's so many variants of it. It also does pretty good damage per shot. The main problem with this one is just that gun is pretty easy to get, and you can get it right away if you want to run over to Novak. You can even just steal it. Even if you want to buy it, it's not that expensive. It's probably going to cost you less than 1,000 caps, assuming that your barter skill isn't super low or anything. And that gun I'd put up into A tier. It's really nice. There is an achievement tied to this one too, where if you kill robots with it, you can get a bonus thanks to that. That's going to be a reference to Blade Runner as well. Luckily, you can get this one early on, and the ammos really, really help with this one. It's a pretty nice handgun. Then we've got the standard 9mm. This is a Browning high-powered pistol, which is pretty nice. You can get this one right at the start. There's a lot of 9mm laying around. And this one does okay damage. It does pretty good damage per second. This one's not really one of the strongest handguns in the game. I'm going to put this one into C tier. It's not as good as like the modded 357, and it's not as good as the 45. It's arguably not even better than the regular 357. It's just that it's a lot less awkward. So if you're not running a low agility character, this one isn't going to really matter one way or the other. The Browning high powered actually reloads fairly quick, which is nice. It does have a good magazine. There's tons of 9mm rounds, and you can even get a couple different types of 9mm, which is good. So that one is really nice. You're going to have like a fully fixed up one of these pretty early on. The modded 9mm is pretty good too. I'm going to put this one up into B tier. I think it's pretty decent. It has two mods where you get a scope on it, which is kind of whatever, that's your choice. Bigger one has a larger mag size so that it goes up to 20 rounds. That is pretty good. Makes it so you can shoot it pretty fast, does pretty decent damage. It's okay all the way around, kind of just dealing with everything. Maria is probably going to go a tier higher than that, up into A tier. Maria is pretty nice. It is one of the more ammo efficient weapons. You can kill enemies with it fairly fast. It's really cool looking. It's Benny's gun. You can take it off of him and kill him with it, and you'll get a challenge done with that too, which is kind of cool. Usually I do that by either punching him and knocking him out and then taking this off of him, or just keep shooting it until he drops it with like the Silent 22 or something. That actually helps quite a bit, but Maria is pretty good. The regular 10mm pistol I'd probably put into C tier as well. This one's decent. It's got okay damage. It's got an okay round. It's very similar to the 9mm and the 45 in a lot of ways, where it's pretty good all the way around it. Just sort of everything. It does have quite a few mods which are good, and mods aren't super hard to find with it. It is a classic of the Fallout games, but it's not as common in Fallout New Vegas as it is in like Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. The modded version I'd put up into B tier. This one has an extended mag, a laser sight, and a suppressor on it. The suppressor's pretty good. This is also a sneak-in weapon, so it's another big suppressed gun that you could sneak into an area. The bullets are still pretty good. It holds 16 shots. Laser sight does make it more accurate, so all of that is pretty good. Weathered 10mm is also going to go into C tier. This is just an upscaled version of the regular 10mm that you can start out with. It just has slightly better stats all the way around, so that's really cool. You can get this from the DLC right away. Modded version of it, also going to go up into B tier. This is one of the few unique weapons that can be modded. Although mods don't show up on this one, usually they can with other mods that you put in the game, but usually it'll just look like a standard weathered 10mm, but it can still have like the suppressor, the laser sight, and the extended mag on it. Just a slightly better version than the other 10mm pistol. The 12.7mm pistol I'd put up into B tier. This one's kind of awkward because it breaks pretty quick and it doesn't have the best accuracy, but at close range it does hit really hard, so that's pretty nice. With the mods on it, it's kind of cool. This one only does get one mod, which is the suppressor, which is why I don't have a modded version of it here. It's okay. It's nothing way crazy. You don't really need it on there. You can't sneak this one in. So it's kind of in an awkward spot, but the 12.7mm rounds are pretty strong, so I think it goes up to B tier. Little Devil will go up to S tier. This one's one of the strongest pistols in the game. This one is supposed to be a sneak-in weapon, but it's bugged, so it doesn't work that way unless you have mods that fix it, so then it is a regular sneak-in weapon. Then it's a lot better. It does have a higher rate of fire. It has more damage than the standard 12.7mm. It has a higher crit chance, which is a huge factor of why it's much higher. It's just all around a whole lot better of a handgun, even though it's kind of an awkward-looking handgun and I don't use it too often. Then we've got the Hunting Revolver. Hunting Revolver is going to go up into A tier. It is a very good revolver. This one does really high damage. This is the biggest iron in the West. It uses the 45-70 round, which is very powerful, although maybe a little bit difficult to get. This one always has a scope on it. It's a 5-round shot, still affected by the Cowboy perk. This one's pretty powerful. It's a very nice gun. You're not going to be able to sneak this one in anywhere, though. None of the Hunting Revolvers let you do that. The modified version of it, I'd also put up into A tier. This one's pretty good. The modified version is from the Gunner's Arsenal, where you can get an expanded cylinder. So instead of holding 5 rounds, it holds 6. So it's a regular revolver, or quote-unquote regular revolver. There's plenty of revolvers that use more or less rounds than that. But this one goes up to the regular 6 rounds, and it can also get a match barrel, which makes it the most accurate handgun in the game. This is like the sniper rifle of pistols, and if you're doing a pistol-only run, then this is definitely one of the better ones. Then we've got the Ranger Sequoia. This one's going all the way up into S tier. It is a very powerful handgun. Does a lot of damage. Has very long range. Yeah, it looks really cool. It's one of my favorite looking handguns ever. Doesn't fire super quick, as you'd kind of expect, but it is very, very powerful. So, very nice handgun. The Police Pistol from Dead Money is going to go up to B tier. This is one that isn't affected by Cowboy for whatever reason, even though it is a revolver. This is also a 357. This is better than the regular 357 revolver because it has a swing out cylinder, actually has above average crit damage, can still be snuck in. It's all around a pretty good weapon, and the main problem with it is you do have to go to Dead Money in order to get it, and Dead Money is a pretty difficult DLC, so that's why it's going to go here in B tier. And then our last pistol is a Silent 22, which is going to go up to C tier. This one's pretty decent all the way around, even though it has very low stats. It still has good crits. You can still spam it out really fast. It still holds 16 shots. It's a regular holdout weapon, so you don't need any sneak investment in order to carry it in. Ammo is going to be the main issue since it just has regular rounds, plinking rounds, and hollow points, which aren't the best, but they're okay, and it's a decent all-around handgun. And this is where all the handguns would go. Now we're going to move on to the rifles. So first up, we got the Anti-Materiel Rifle, and this one's going to go right up into S tier. This one hits really hard. This is the big 50 cal rifle. You can kill just about anything with this in 1 or 2 shots. It holds 8 rounds, even though you may not even need that many rounds with it because it does have a slow bolt cycle. The mods for it are pretty good. The ammunition variety is really good for it, especially if you want to throw 50 cal explosive rounds in there. Can be pretty overkill, and this thing is very heavy to carry around, so you might not want to be carrying it around with tons of ammo, or even swapping out for some of the other snipers. They can also be pretty good, but yeah. 50 cal is really good. Modded 50 cal is even better. I'd also throw that one up into S tier. You can put a better bolt so it shoots faster, carbon fiber parts to lighten it up, and a big old suppressor on it. Suppressor doesn't matter too much, but the other parts are really nice, especially the lightweight carbon fiber parts. They're really good. You can also have it with heavy weight and cut its weight in half again, and it goes down to like 8 weight or 6 weight. So it's more manageable then. It's still going to be fairly heavy, especially in hardcore where you have to carry around 50 cal rounds. But an absolutely iconic weapon of New Vegas and an extremely powerful one. Assault Carbine is pretty good. This one's going to go up into A tier. There is 2 versions of the Assault Carbine, the regular one and the Gunner's Arsenal one. The regular one is affected by Grunt. Gunner's Arsenal one is not, weirdly enough, but the Gunner's Arsenal one does get more mods, so I usually go with that one. The regular Assault Carbine can still get 1 mod, which is its extended magazine, which is kind of nice. Regularly, this one holds 24 rounds, then it goes up to 30 rounds. Uses the 5mm ammunition, which is actually pretty versatile, so that's nice. It's all around pretty decent for killing most things. It doesn't do too much damage per shot, but it almost always has armor piercing on like all of its different ammos. So that's pretty nice. The modded version I'd put up in S tier. It's a very strong weapon. It can mow down a lot of enemies really quick, especially non-armored enemies. Like it can rip apart Casdors pretty fast. It can even rip apart armored enemies pretty quick, especially if you want to throw the armor piercing rounds in here. 5mm rounds are pretty easy to find, and you can find a lot of them. For mods, you can have an extended mag, so you get more bullets. You go from 24 to 30. You can have a lighter bolt to attack faster, which is really nice. And you can also have a forged receiver, I believe, to give it more item HP, which is pretty good. This one actually has a lot of item HP, even though it's a full auto weapon. It doesn't break super fast, so that's pretty nice. Then we've got the automatic rifle. The automatic rifle I put all the way up into S tier. The BAR this is a machine gun that fires 308 rounds, and it is quite powerful. This one does really high damage. Doesn't have great accuracy. Its spread is pretty bad at longer ranges, and it does only hold 20 rounds, but it doesn't shoot super fast. It shoots faster than any of the other 308 round guns though, so that's pretty nice. And 308 round guns are just good in general, so this one just hitting really hard, doing a lot of damage, and just clearing up just about everything is really nice. There is a modded version of this too where it just has, I think it's 10% increased rate of fire. We don't have another version of it down here, but yeah, that one's also really good. Battle rifle is going to go up into A tier. You can buy this from the gun runners or any vendor that sells it. This one's pretty good. It's a 308 gun. It has a lot of item HP. It does high damage. It shoots really fast. Its accuracy isn't the best, but it's still really nice, and it has a ping because it's based off the M1 Garand, or M1 Garand, however you'd like to say it. I don't really take the battle rifle too often, but that's because this machine exists, and this machine I'd put all the way up into S tier. This is the unique version of it, but it's in the base game. You can get this through a hidden quest, so it's kind of out of your way to get. This thing has a ton of item HP. It has like 600 item HP for a semi-auto rifle, is insane. Still uses a 308 round, still has high damage per second. It's just all around a very solid rifle for doing just about any job with. Then we got the BB gun. This one's going to be our very first F tier gun. The regular BB gun is just not that strong. It has low stats all the way around. You can hold a lot of BBs with it, which is really cool. But that's about the only thing it really has going for it, because it doesn't have a variety of ammunition. It is affected by Cowboy, but since it has low damage, that doesn't really help it. This is mostly a toy. You can still kill like smaller enemies with it though without too much trouble. The unique one, on the other hand, is a whole lot better. I'd put this one up into B tier. This one actually does pretty high damage because it has very high crit damage. It does about the same crit damage as a brush gun, which is pretty insane. And this one still holds a lot of rounds. It can hold 100 rounds in it, which is good. BBs aren't particularly difficult to get if you go to the quartermaster at the NCR. You can buy tons of them. This one actually also is a silent weapon too, so it works really well in like a silent sniper-like build. There is still projectile velocity on this though, so it is a little bit weird shooting at long range with the BB gun. Then we got the brush gun. Brush gun's going to go up in A tier. Big 4570 lever action. It's affected by Cowboy. It does a ton of damage. It has awkward sights, I will say that. There's a modded version of this, which is a forged receiver version of it that gives it more item HP. Nothing way crazy there. 4570 guns are going to be powerful by themselves. Brush gun is really good. You can take this off of a couple different enemies. It's really scary when this is being shot at you. So yeah, that one is very, very powerful. Medicine stick's going all the way up in S tier. This is just a better version of the brush gun. It's got all around better stats. It holds more rounds and it has way better sights. The big old ghost ring sight on it is fantastic. And this one is just one of the best general purpose weapons too. Usually I end up taking this or this machine, or I use both of them as like my general purpose gun, or the Survivalist rifle, which we'll get to here in a second, because all of them are very powerful weapons. Cowboy Repeater, I would say, is going to go into B tier. This one's pretty decent. Cowboy Repeater is one of the first lever action guns, probably going to be the first lever action gun besides a BB gun that you find. It holds a decent amount of shots. This shoots the 357 round. The sights on it aren't that great. I know a lot of people really hate the old aperture sight, the old like flip up ladder aperture, which yeah, it is awkward. It's not the best sights in the world, but hip firing this thing is pretty quick, which is nice. It actually fires quite fast and it is very accurate and it does do good damage, as well as there is an abundance of 357 rounds and 38 special rounds that you can load into this right at the start. So that's actually really good. It's a pretty decent weapon all the way around. Modded version of the Cowboy Repeater is probably going to go up into A tier. This one's a lot better. You get a longer tube, so it goes from holding 7 rounds to 11. You get a better custom action, so it fires a lot faster, and you get more lightweight parts on it. If you could just fix its sights, which I do have a mod that actually fixes these things' sights, then it's actually a really solid weapon for just about everything. Still affected by the Cowboy perk. You can get it early on. It's very durable. It's all around just actually a really good gun once you get used to it. The long carbine, this is the unique version of the Cowboy Repeater. This one I'm actually going to say is B tier with the Cowboy Repeater. I don't think it's as good as the modified one, unless you really like the scope, because this one does have the longer tube, so it already has 11 rounds in it. It also has a faster rate of fire. The scope on it's a little bit weird, and this one does have its own unique reload animation, since it's the reload animation from Fallout 3, where you just twist the barrel, load down the rounds, and then turn it back. That does make it so you reload everything, so if you're completely empty, this is a lot faster to reload than the modified version of it, but it's still a little bit awkward to be using overall, and it's really awkward to get this if you don't plan on killing the NCR, because if you don't plan on killing the NCR, you're going to have to steal this from Sterling, which means you're going to have to steal his bullets, which is already kind of difficult, and then you're going to have to reverse pickpocket him again so that you can take the carbine off of him. Then we've got the hunting rifle. Hunting rifle I'm going to put up into B tier. This one is a 308 gun. This one is a bolt action. This does high damage. It's very accurate. Sights are a little bit weird on it, and it doesn't shoot very fast because it is a bolt action, but it hits really hard, so the hunting rifle is actually a very, very nice gun overall. One of my favorite guns to actually just carry around. I really like the look of it, and the mods aren't too difficult to find for it either. 308 also has a ton of really good ammos. So modified version of the hunting rifle is going to go up into A tier. I think it's really nice. You can put a larger magazine, taking it from 5 to 10. You can put a scope on this, and you can put a better bolt on this so that it cycles faster. That's probably one of my favorite guns just to carry around in the wasteland because it just fits so well. Maybe not the best 308 gun, but still really, really good. Then we've got Paciencia. This one is the unique hunting rifle that you can buy in Novak. And this one's also going to go up into A tier. This is only 3 shots, but it does have a faster rate of fire than the regular hunting rifle. It also has kind of misaligned sights, which are a little bit awkward. And it actually has more zoom on it than I think the hunting rifle with the scope on it, weirdly enough. The iron sights are actually better in that regard. It also has the same crit damage as the 50 cal. So if you hit crits with this, it does a ton of damage. And you could argue this being a better sniper rifle than the 50 cal, and I can agree in certain ways. Still hard for me to give up 50 cal with explosive rounds, but Paciencia is a really cool gun. The light machine gun's up next. This one's going to go up into S tier. This one shoots 5.56 rounds, which makes it super versatile. It also has one mod, but we don't have a modded version of it here. The mod just increases its magazine size from 90 to 200. This one's one of the best for just mowing down just about anything, because 5.56 rounds are super versatile, so if you need to load hollow points into this, you can. If you need to load armor-piercing rounds into it, you absolutely can. This just rips right through everything. It's a very strong gun. Bozer. Bozer's kind of weird. Bozer I'm going to put into B tier. Bozer is like a mix between a sniper rifle and a light machine gun and doesn't really work well for either of them. It's not a terrible gun because it uses 5.56, so you can still absolutely use it all the way through the game. Does only have a 30 round magazine. This one's also really expensive if you want to buy it. The scope on it is okay, and it doesn't have very much recoil, and it is kind of a heavy weapon. It's just a very awkward mishmash of a weapon that, at least in Fallout 2, is actually quite good. In New Vegas, it's just kind of okay. Then we got the Marksman Carbine. Marksman Carbine I put up in A tier. This one's really good. This one already has the scope on it, so that's really nice. Holds 20 rounds in it by default, I believe. Or is it 24 rounds? One of those two. Uses the 5.56 round, so super versatile round. Does high damage, has a fast rate of fire. Actually has a lot of item health too. It's all around a really good weapon. Really good VATS weapon too. Has very low action points. I haven't really talked about that with some of these weapons, but some of these weapons are really good in the VATS build too, like a Light Shining in Darkness, Lucky, the Marksman Carbine, Maria. Those are all really good weapons too. All-American is going to go right up into S tier. This is the unique version of the Marksman Carbine. You have to get this at the bottom of Vault 34, so it's a difficult vault to go through. There's a lot of ghouls there, a lot of things that can deal high damage to you, but it's totally worth it because when you get down there, you get this. And this thing puts down just about everything super fast, does really high damage, costs basically no action points to use. It's probably one of the best VATS weapons in the game. And it already has a scope on there, already an extended mag. It's really cool. Up next, we've got Service Rifle. Service Rifle I'd put into C tier. This one's an okay gun. It uses the 5.56 rounds, so that's really good. It does okay damage, has a large magazine. Modded version of it is a little bit better. I'd put it up into B tier. More durability, faster rate of fire does help, and you can get this thing maxed out pretty quick. So that's pretty nice. A lot of NCR troopers carry this around, so it's not super difficult to get. You can get it right at the very start. The Survivalist rifle, I'd say, is S tier. This one's fantastic. This one doesn't shoot 5.56. This one shoots 12.7, which does limit its options, but it does do a lot of damage per shot. This one also only holds 10 rounds. This one you find in Zion. You find it next to Randall Clark's dead body, or skeleton. So it had a lot of personality to it. The only, I guess, kind of con with this one is the misaligned sights or the bent sights. You can fix that with mods, which is kind of nice, but even just hip firing this thing, it is an absolute beast for taking down most things. Sniper rifle is probably going to go up into A tier. This one's nice. I think it's just a better version of the hunting rifle in most cases, even though the hunting rifle does more damage. This one has faster follow-up shots, and it always comes with the scope on it. Modded version I'd also put up into A tier. Modded version gets carbon fiber parts to make it more lightweight, which is good. It still has a scope on it and it has a suppressor. All of those are really nice. Any 308 gun is going to be good. Then we have Christina's COS rifle. This one's going to go up into S tier. This one's really nice. This one does even better damage. Always has the suppressor on it. It's all around just an upgrade from the regular sniper rifles. You find this one in Old World Blues, and it's a pretty good gun there. Then we've got the Gobi. The Gobi is also going to go up into S tier. This one you need 100 lockpicking in order to get. You got to get it from the sniper's nest. Always has a scope on there. Actually holds an extra bullet. This one holds 6. Has really good crits. Has really high crit damage. Has a really fast follow-up. Has more item health than the other snipers too. So it's actually a really strong weapon and you can rush it right away. Then we got the Trail Carbine. Trail Carbine I'd also say is A tier. Trail Carbine is actually pretty nice. There is a mod for it which is just a scope, which I wouldn't really say is a pro or a con to it. Just depends on if you like the iron sights. I would say this one does have the best iron sights of the regular lever action rifles. I'd say the Medicine Stag has the best, but this one is better than like the brush gun or the Cowboy repeater by default. It has much nicer sights. Uses the 44 rounds, so it does pretty high damage there. Has a lot of options, has a lot of durability. It's affected by the Cowboy perk, so it's just all around really solid. The Varmint Rifle I would say is probably like D tier. This one's just not super strong. There's better 5.56 guns than this, although the modded version of this is actually a lot better. And I apparently don't have a modded version of it anywhere down here, it looks like. So that one honestly should get its own mod, because that one I would maybe say is a tier higher up into D, going from D tier to C tier. Because the regular Varmint Rifle, you get it right at the start, which is good. It uses 5.56, which is pretty good. With mods, you can get a night vision scope, a suppressor, and an extended mag. All of those help it out quite a bit. And like the scope and the suppressor are really good. This actually turns it into a decent sniper rifle in the early game. So like the modded version should be up into C tier. I just don't have a version of it, I guess. The Rat Slayer is actually really nice. The Rat Slayer is one of my favorite rifles in the entire game. However, I'm probably going to have to put this one into B tier. It is still really good. It's really good in the early game because this has a 5x crit modifier, so you're guaranteed to like hit crits with it. It's all decked out with all the mods already on it. It's also just looks cooler. It's a little bit of a pain to get right away because the big rats in there can kind of beat you up. But Rat Slayer is really strong. It's just I don't find it as strong as like the modified hunting rifle or something like the sniper rifles. So I think a tier lower is kind of fair. Even though I'm sure there's going to be people that argue it up to A tier, which it is really good. It's one of my favorite guns in the whole game. Then we move on from rifles to submachine guns, actually. Cool. So first up, we have the Tommy gun. Tommy gun is pretty solid. Tommy gun's going to go up into A tier. This isn't the most accurate submachine gun, but the 45 rounds are really powerful. Does good damage, does really high damage per second. You can also modify it right away. And the modded version of it's going to go right up into S tier. I think this is one of the best submachine guns. It has the big drum mag then. So you get like 60 rounds in this instead of 30. And you can get the compensator, I believe, on the front of it to where it's more accurate. So it's actually really strong at close range for just spraying down anything. You can't sneak this into a casino. There's only one of the submachine guns that you actually can, and that would be Sleepy Time. So we'll talk about that in a second. Regular 9mm submachine gun, I'm going to put this one into C tier. It's pretty solid. It actually does do good damage and good damage per second. Modified version of it's even better, and same with the unique version of it. So this one is by no means bad. It's just that there are some better versions of it that you can get pretty early on. You can get a 9mm right at the very start of the game if you fix the one up in Doc's house. So that can be nice. As long as you got plenty of 9mm rounds, this one's going to serve you really well. I really like the grease gun. Then we got the modded version. The modded version is going to go to B tier. This gets a faster rate of fire and a bigger magazine, so you get a drum mag on this as well. It goes from holding 30 rounds to 60 rounds. You can spray down just about anything with this. It's really good for like killing Kazdors, really good for killing anything that doesn't have high armor. Like the 9mm grease gun is actually really, really good. Then we've got the unique version, which is Vance's machine gun, and this one I'm going to say is A tier. This one is one of the nicest submachine guns because 9mm is super common. This one just looks nicer and it has better sights than the regular grease gun does. The only kind of downside is getting this, but you can rush it right away. You'll either need to pickpocket this one, at least pickpocket the key to get it, convince them with speech in order to get Vance's, or have lockpicking high enough to get in and grab Vance's submachine gun. But if you do any of those, it's a very, very solid weapon, especially just for carrying around and spraying at just about anything. The 10mm submachine gun is decent all the way around. I would say this one's also C tier. It's basically the same type of deal as the 9mm. It does similar damage, shoots a similar bullet. I think it's a little bit less accurate than the 9mm, and you're less likely to find 10mm than 9mm. But for the most part, it's pretty much on par with the 9mm submachine gun. Modded version of it's probably up in the B tier. This one gets an extended mag going from 30 to 40 rounds, and it also gets a compensator on it, which is pretty nice. Makes it so you can spray down enemies a little bit easier and at a little bit longer range. And then Sleepy Time will go up into A tier. This one's pretty nice. This one is the only sneak-in submachine gun. It already has the suppressor on it, and it also already has the extended mag on it. So this one holds 40 rounds. It's actually really good. I would say it's on par with Vance's submachine gun in most situations, besides you being able to sneak this one in. The 12.7mm submachine gun I'd also say is A tier. Even though this one looks a little bit goofy, because it's like a mix between a Vector and a P90, it does do high damage, it doesn't hold the most amount of shots, and it's not the most accurate, but at close range it absolutely rips through just about everything. Modified version of it is going to go right up into S tier. This one's really good. You can get the extended mag on it, which gives it like 6 more bullets. You can get the laser sight, which reduces its spread, and you can also get the suppressor on this. All of those are pretty good. This is like a fantastic weapon for taking out Cazadors, taking out really anything. It can take out just about everything. I still think the Tommy gun's a bit better than it, just because this one can spray faster and do more damage per second. But the 12.7mm is still really nice, because 12.7mm rounds I think are more common than 45 rounds. And if I'm using like a light shining in darkness, I can always use like the 12.7 so that they're not sharing ammo. Or vice versa if I want to use Little Devil and I want to use the Tommy gun. Nail gun's actually pretty decent. Nail gun I think I'd also put into C tier. This one does have armor piercing on it by default and it holds a lot of rounds. You can just find these around the divide. They're pretty decent. You can also make nails super easy. You just need scrap metal to get them. And if you want to run to the divide and pick up a nail gun right away, you can absolutely do that. And it's a pretty strong early game weapon. I would actually say it's a bit stronger than like the 10mm and the 9mm submachine gun, but maybe not like another tier up from them, so I think right there's fine. Silent 22 I would also put into C tier. I think this is the weakest of the submachine guns, but it is still a submachine gun, so its damage and damage per second is still really high. It also has a huge magazine. It holds 180 rounds, or with a mod you can go up to 240 rounds. Has a really high rate of fire. It's mostly just limited by the fact that it has the 22 bullet, which is either just regular rounds, hollow point rounds, or the plinking rounds. So it's really bad against armored enemies, especially heavily armored enemies, but it's really good against non-armored enemies because you can just hose them down super fast. And then we move on to shotguns. So we got the Caravan shotgun, which is a decent overall shotgun. Shotguns are pretty good. They're similar to submachine guns, so I'm going to put this one up into C tier. It's pretty decent. It has okay damage, has pretty good damage per second. It's an under and over double barrel. That's a 20 gauge. 20 gauge and 12 gauge have a lot of ammo. 20 gauge is less ammo variety than the 12 gauge, but you do get more of it early on. So the Caravan shotgun, if you get it early on, is pretty good. The sturdy Caravan shotgun is just better than the regular Caravan shotgun in a lot of ways, but I'm just going to put it into C tier as well. It's a better starting weapon, but it isn't affected by shotgun perks, so that makes it worse later on. It's not affected by Shotgun Surgeon, and it's not affected by and Stay Back, which are two really, really strong perks for shotgun builds. It also has the worst spread out of any of the shotguns besides the sawed-off double barrel, so spread pattern isn't as consistent as it. It's just kind of like in an awkward spot, but at least you do start out with it, and it's free, so that's really cool. Hunting shotgun is very good. I'm going to put this one up into A tier. This is all around a very solid shotgun. Does high damage, holds a lot of rounds. Mods on it are really good, which we do have a modded version down here. And the 12 gauge round is super versatile. The modded version of it, I would say, is S tier. This is one of the best shotguns in the game. It has a longer tube going from 5 rounds up to 8 shells, so that's really nice. As well as you can get a choke on this, which makes it the most accurate shotgun in the game. So if you want to load slugs into this and shoot it at a distance, you can absolutely do that. It's very powerful. The unique version, the Dinner Bell, I would say is also S tier. Whoops, that's a minigun. That is not the Dinner Bell, so. Dinner Bell, also S tier. This one does really high damage. It already has the choke attached to it, so it's more accurate, but not as accurate as the modified hunting shotgun. More accurate than the regular one. It also doesn't have the extended tube. This one is locked behind the quest Bleed Me Dry, which is a very long quest and a fairly difficult quest, but the shotgun you get from it is really, really strong. Lever action shotgun is A tier. This one's pretty good. This one's the best of the 20 gauge shotguns. It's a 5-round shotgun that is also affected by the Cowboy perk since it is a lever action. Then you can throw something like and Stay Back at Shotgun Surgeon on here, and this one is pretty solid all the way around. I always like the lever action shotgun. Do kind of wish you can get a modified version that actually has like the full stock on it, but even so, the cut down stock is still pretty awesome. Riot shotgun's easy S tier. This is the most overpowered weapon in the game with end stay back. This one is a semi-auto shotgun that holds 12 rounds in it. It reloads super fast. It shoots super fast. Does high damage. Does really high damage per second. And you can just bully anything with it. It's insane. Sawed-off double barrel is probably like C tier. This one's decent, although it's only really good at very close range. You can sneak this one in. This is the only shotgun you can actually sneak into casinos, so that gives it an advantage. Not very accurate. You do have to fire out both barrels at the same time, meaning that it has pretty good burst damage, but it doesn't have great sustain damage with the constant reloads to it. Still is a 12 gauge though, so it still has a lot of options there. Big Boomer is probably also C tier. This one's pretty decent too. This one's the unique version. You do need to go out of your way to get it, and you'll probably need to reverse pickpocket if you're not okay with killing Old Lady Gibson. If you're okay with killing her, you can just take it there. You can't sneak this one in, and this one has very similar stats to the regular sawed-off shotgun, so it's not a huge upgrade, if an upgrade at all. And then the single shot shotgun, probably also C tier, probably the lowest on the C tiers. This one is the first shotgun that you're probably going to come across. It's a single shot shotgun. It costs a ton of action points to use. It's fairly heavy, but it does have the best damage per shot out of any of the 20 gauge shotguns, so that is really nice. Then we've got the heavy weapons. So first up, we have the K9000 Cyber Gun. This one's weird. I'm going to put this one C tier. This one has always been weird to me. It shoots the 357 round. It shoots reasonably fast. It has a scope on it. It actually does pretty good damage and damage per second. It's very weird. It's probably one of the weirdest weapons that I've ever seen in any of the Fallout games, so yeah, not one of my favorites, but it's alright. The unique version of it, or the modified version of it, technically these are both modded, but the modified version is better. You can get an increased rate of fire and I think reduced spread on the modified version of the K9000. I want to say, honestly, I don't use this one that much, but it is better than the regular K9000 gun. And it still is using the 357 round, so it is still fairly reliable in that regard of just dealing okay damage. Fido is in a similar situation. That one will go up to B tier. This one you can mod actually multiple Fidos, and it switches it from 357 to 44 Magnum, which gives it a more damage boost, but you can't put the other mods on it, so also strong. And if you have an excess of 44s, then this one can be good, but otherwise it is really awkward. Minigun's actually pretty decent. Minigun, I would say, is probably B tier. And this one's pretty nice. Shoots the 5mm round, shoots really fast. It does have high requirements. It is very heavy, which is why I'm not putting it any higher. And I don't think it's quite as good as the Assault Carbine, but it is still a pretty decent machine gun. It's also really worth a lot if you want to collect them to sell. Modified version I'd put up into A tier, where you get a faster motor, so it shoots faster, and I think it also has a faster spin up, as well as it has a larger magazine, so those are really nice. More sustained fire is always something really good. The unique version of it, which is the CZ57 Avenger, is also going to go up into A tier. This one has more damage, more rate of fire, but a less overall magazine size. It doesn't weigh as much, though. And this one you can actually rush and get pretty early on, so that's pretty nice. As long as you're okay with the heavy weapons, the miniguns are actually pretty decent in New Vegas. Then we've got the shoulder-mounted machine gun. This one's decent, too. I'd put this one up into B tier. This one fires 10mm rounds. It does okay damage. You find this in the Divide. A couple enemies have it. I don't really like it over something like Sleepy Time, but it's an okay 10mm gun nonetheless. The modified version of it actually has a lot of mods where it has a bigger magazine, faster rate of fire, and I want to say a reduced spread. I could be wrong about that. So modified version is a bit better. It's really good against non-armored enemies or lightly armored enemies, especially if you want to throw hollow points or jacketed hollow points in there. It's actually really good, but against other enemy types, it sometimes struggles. Alien pistol is kind of a weird one. I'm going to put this one into B tier and split the difference because this one ranges from like F tier to S tier. It does really high damage, and it's a guaranteed crit on every single shot. You do need to have the Wild Wasteland trait in order to get this one, so that can be a downside for it, and it does have limited ammo. Once you run out of ammo for the Alien Blaster, you can't get any more ammo anywhere else in the Wasteland unless you spawn it in. So this one, it ranges from like really strong pistol to useless pistol if you run out of bullets. So that's what I'm going to put into B tier. The Seafinder I'm going to put into F tier. The Seafinder is incredibly fun and can be incredibly strong, but this is a very heavy weapon that you have to do a quest for, and you specifically have to route the power to the Seafinder in order to use it. It does have a really cool backstory though. The backstory to the Seafinder is awesome. And this one lets you fire down a space laser on top of your enemies to smite them. It is very, very spectacular, but you get 1 shot per day with the C-Finder, and it has to be outdoors. So it's a very finicky weapon that can be really powerful, and it's a lot of fun, but it's not a very reliable source of damage, unless of course you glitch it to where you can use it multiple times a day, or you enable like the God mode where you can use it multiple times per day, in which case then it's fantastic for smiting down everything. Flare pistol is also going to go into F tier as a weapon. The flare pistol is one of the worst weapons, although you don't usually want to be using it as a weapon. You want to be using it as a tool, because if you do fire this at tunnelers or deathclaws, they flee from it, which is really, really nice. So it's not bad to have a flare pistol on your person, but for a weapon it does very low damage, it costs a lot of fuel to use, the burn over time is not that great. It is affected by the Pyromaniac perk, so that's kind of cool, but with low damage that doesn't really help it all that much. So as a tool, really good. As an actual weapon, not very good at all. And then we got the laser pistol. Laser pistol's pretty decent. I'd put this one up into C tier. This one shoots pretty fast, does okay damage, it holds a lot of bullets, holds 30 rounds in it. It's very accurate, so that's pretty good. It just kind of has low damage. Modified laser pistol is actually a lot better, and I'd put this one up into B tier. This one has even better damage. It has better sights. It actually has sights once you put those on. So yeah, laser pistol, pretty nice. Then we have all the unique versions of the laser pistol. So compliance regulator, I'm going to say this one's S tier, because this one has a chance of instantly stunning enemies. And if they're stunned for like 10 or 15 seconds with this thing, which makes it basically so that thing can't fight back for the entirety of the fight. Makes it super easy to kill anything early on. You can rush to Zion and grab this one right away. And it's a really good weapon on really any build. It can be really strong on like a melee and unarmed build. Shoot something in a distance, knock it down, and then just you can wail on it, do tons of damage per second at very close range. So really good tool. Not so much weapon, it doesn't do a whole lot of damage per shot. It's kind of similar to the flare gun in that role, but the flare gun's more of like a tool that you're going to be carrying around just to scare off deathclaws or just to scare off tunnelers, whereas the compliance regulator you can use on everything, and it's actually pretty good. The missing laser pistol, which is this one, is the exact same thing as a regular laser pistol. It's slightly worse stats overall, and it's just part of a quest, so technically you can take this dead money because it is a quest item, but you can get regular laser pistols at dead money, or at least one of them, and it's just going to have higher stats than this, so it's not even worth doing that. Then we got Pew Pew. Pew Pew is pretty awesome. I'm going to put this one up into A tier. This one does really high damage. This is what you get from completing the Sunset Sarsaparilla quest. I think this is one of the best energy handguns in the game. However, this does take a lot of ammo. This only gets 2 shots before you need to reload it, so you're going to be reloading it pretty often. And it does consume 5 cells per shot, so you're going to be going through cells quicker with this. Not that that's such a big deal, but it is a little bit awkward, so that's why I'd say it's A tier. Plasma Defender is really good. Plasma Defender I'd say is B tier. This one's all around a really solid plasma pistol. Does good damage, has good damage per second, reloads pretty fast, has mods on it, which I always forget that this thing gets mods, but it's all around a very solid little plasma pistol. The modded version of it, I'd put up into A tier. I think this one's even better. It can get a scope, larger mag, and I think it's more damage on the end of it. Could be wrong about that last one. It's been a little while since I used the modded Plasma Defender. I always forget about that it even has mods. But when it does have mods, it's actually pretty good. The scope's a little bit strange to me for it, but the other parts, like the extended mag, are actually really good, where it gets double the amount of ammo. This one's really nice, especially if you find it on Dead Blight members. So you can always pick them up. Or Dead Bright members. Sorry, not Blight members. Plasma Pistol is also pretty solid. I'd say this one's also into C tier, where this one does good damage. You can buy these right away. This one does consume 2 cells per shot, just like the Plasma Defender does, as opposed to the laser weapons. Still pretty good. Projectile moves kind of slow, so you got to lead your shots a little bit at longer range, but overall pretty decent. The modified version's much better, and I'd put it up into B tier. It's a solid all-around energy weapon pistol, to where this one holds more shots, it has faster moving projectiles, it's just all around a whole lot better than the regular one. So whether you like lasers or plasma, you actually have pretty good options for pistols, regardless of that. Unfortunately, you don't have any unique versions of the Plasma Pistol or Plasma Defender, though. And then we have the Pulse Gun. Pulse Gun's going to go all the way up into S tier 2, specifically against robots. This one is another weapon similar to the Flare Gun, where against robots and against power armor, this thing absolutely wrecks them. It destroys them in no time. Against everything else, this weapon is useless. So use it only on them, and it's really powerful. Use it on anything else, and it does next to nothing. So yeah, I guess I'd put it up into S tier. And I don't know, keeping the Flare Gun in F tier feels a little bit weird because of its usefulness, but I still feel like this has more uses. There's more robots to shoot, although robots are not as scary as like Deathclaws are, so I don't know, these weapons are good, but they're kind of weird in and of themselves. Then we got the recharger pistol. I'd say this one's probably like C tier. This one does okay damage. Actually recharges fairly fast. It's a decent handgun. You don't need to use ammo for it. It is heavy for a handgun, but overall it's actually pretty solid. It doesn't get affected by like laser commander like the other laser weapons do, so it's less useful than them in the later game. However, in the early game, if you get a recharger pistol, it's actually really nice to have. Same thing goes with the recharger rifle. The unique version of the recharger pistol is probably A tier as well. It's really nice. It's probably my favorite energy weapon handgun, so I use it the most often. This is basically an energy submachine gun, where technically this is still the recharger pistol, but you buy this at Novac. And this one recharges much faster, holds more rounds, but it is full auto if you hold down the trigger. So you can actually do a lot of damage and damage per second with it actually really, really quick. So that's pretty nice. For the sonic emitters, you actually have quite a few of them. So first up is Gabriel's Bark. This one has knockback on it, which is pretty good. So I'd put this one up into B tier. Can be kind of nice to knock down enemies. Then we've got, what do we got next? I'm going to say this one's Opera Singer. This one has the Dismember ability on it. It's honestly not super useful, so I'm going to put this one into C tier. I think this is actually a downgrade from something like Gabriel's Bark. Then we've got Revelation. At least I think this is Revelation, yeah, because we got Robo-Scorpion and Translynx. So Revelation is the one that you normally have on the weapon. And this one can cause paralysis, which is pretty good, although it doesn't appear to affect as many enemies or affect enemies as quick as something like the Compliance Regulars, so I'm going to put this one up into B tier. Still pretty decent, but not quite as good as some of the other options that you get. Then you've got Robo-Scorpion. This one gives you explosive damage, which can be pretty good, but it can also be a little bit unreliable, so I'm going to put that one B tier as well. And then we have Tarantula, which gives you fire damage, and this one is affected by the Pyromaniac perk. I think this one's the strongest, and I would probably put this one up into A tier. It makes for arguably the best version of the sonic emitter, although all of these are actually pretty good. You can get multiple sonic emitters in Big Mountain. You can also swap these around whenever you'd like. So you're not stuck to any one of these, even if you just have the one pulse gun, you can always switch it around, or the sonic emitter, you can always switch around. Uses the same model as the pulse gun though, so that's kind of cool. Doesn't shoot the same way though. It has much slower moving projectiles. Then we've got the energy rifles. So up first we got the Gauss rifle. This one's going to go up in S tier. This is basically the 50 cal of the energy rifles. Does really high damage. It does only hold one shot, and it does consume 5 ammo every time that you shoot it. Doesn't have the highest amount of item health, but that shouldn't matter, because most of the time you're just going to be using this to pick off enemies at a distance. It's also just a very satisfying weapon to use. The unique version of it with the YCS 186 is also going to go up in S tier. This is just stronger. It has more base damage. It actually costs 1 ammo less to use. However, you need to make sure that you don't have the Wild Wasteland trait, because otherwise you can't get this one. It replaces this with the Alien Blaster. And I would argue that this one is better than Alien Blaster. It does a lot of damage, so yeah, Gauss rifles are really, really cool. Then we got the Hollow Rifle. Hollow Rifle I'd put up into A tier. This one is the pump action grenade launcher rifle that you get in Dead Money. Elijah gives this to you. It's a unique weapon. There is only one of them in the entire game. Does really high damage, has a scope on it, which is really nice, and it shoots pretty thick projectiles out to hit enemies, so that's really good. You have a modified version of it, which I'm going to put this one all the way up in S tier. You can get more damage. You can make this thing unbreakable because it's bugged, so you never have to fix this up, which is pretty awesome. And I think it has like reduced spread or something as its other option. The bonus damage in making it unbreakable is fantastic though. It's one of the best energy weapons, sniper weapons in the entire game. Then we've got the LAER. This one is really strong. This one does really high damage per second. And the only downside to the LAER is that it breaks really quick. So I'm going to put this one up into A tier. It is a very solid weapon. We also have a modified version of it down here, so let me grab that. This one's even better. I'd put this one all the way up into S tier. It just makes it all around stronger. So if you get the mods for it, put those on it. You can get a beam splitter on it, which I think works the same way as the regular laser rifle beam splitter, which just gives you more damage than what it should. This one can also go on the unique version of the LAER 2, which is Elijah's advanced one, which I'm also going to put up in A tier. This one's basically the same as the regular one, although this one breaks faster and holds less rounds. It does have slightly faster rate of fire, which makes it a little bit different, but I would honestly argue the unique version of this is a downgrade from the regular version. It's still really strong. It still does a lot of damage, but it does break even faster. This one has like 75 HP and this one has like 50 HP, so it breaks incredibly quick. Then we've got the Laser RCW. This is the Laser Tommy gun. This one's really cool. This one's one of my favorite guns in New Vegas as well. I'm going to put it into B tier. It's pretty solid. It does use the electronic charge packs. It's one of the few weapons that uses that. Shoots really fast. It's actually really accurate full auto weapon. Doesn't do the most amount of damage, but I mean, I just love the way this one looks. It does have one mod too, which just makes it so it recycles ammo, which can be pretty nice too, but it's nothing way crazy, so that one would probably also stay in B tier. The regular laser rifle is going to go up to B tier as well. It's a pretty solid all-around regular energy weapon. Has a lot of rounds, does good damage, has long range. Just an all-around very solid one. The modified version, though, on the other hand, is going to go all the way up into S tier, because this one has some really good mods on it, where you get increased damage to the beams, you get a scope on this, which is kind of nice, and you get the beam splitter, which is bugged and just flat out gives you double damage. So it makes it quite a bit better than the regular laser rifle. These things also have bonus crit chance on them too, so they are actually really good general purpose weapons, and they have a lot more item HP than some of these other weapons that we've talked about. The AR-14 prototype, the unique version of this is decent, but not as strong as a modded version of it, so I'm going to put this one up in A tier. This one shoots out green lasers. This one consumes 2 ammo every time that you shoot it, similar to plasma rifles. And this one does have still good item HP, and it still has good damage per shot, but it's not as strong as just the modified version of the laser rifle, so I don't actually use it all that often. Then we've got the Van Graffs. This one's going to go up into B tier. For all intents and purposes, this is the same as a regular laser rifle. It's just for a quest, so it is a quest item. You can cheat it into dead money if you want to, but it's really not worth it. And yeah, aside from that, I think it's slightly less stats than a regular laser rifle, so okay enough. Then we've got the multi-plas rifle, which I'm going to put up into A tier. This one does high damage. This is the plasma shotgun. It does consume a lot of ammo, and the projectiles move kind of slow, and sometimes they're a little bit erratic. But if you get up close, this one does a lot of damage per second. The regular plasma rifle is also probably B tier. This one does more damage than the laser rifle, but it does have a slower moving projectile, and it does consume 2 ammo every time that you shoot it. But it's very similar in stats aside from that. So this one really depends on what you like more, whether you like the slow-moving, heavy-hitting plasma, or you like the fast-shooting, more accurate laser rifle. Both are pretty good. Both are perfectly acceptable. Modded version is even better. I'd put this one up into A tier. The modified plasma rifle is actually pretty consistent all the way around, to where you can have faster-moving projectiles on it, so that's really good. And it's just all around pretty nice for a general-purpose energy weapon. It's also got decent item health, so that's nice. The Van Graff's plasma rifle is also going to go to B tier. This is the same as like the laser rifle. They're just for a quest. Once you complete the quest, you don't use them ever again, so it's just sort of whatever. The Q35 Matter Modulator is the unique version of the plasma rifle, and this one's going to go all the way up into S tier. This one's one of the best energy weapons in the game. This one only uses 1 ammo every time that you shoot it compared to the regular plasma rifle, so you're more ammo efficient, and it does almost the same damage per shot. It also has more crit damage on it, and it's super easy to get. You can run and grab this thing right away. It also has a lot of item health for an energy weapon. It has like 250 or 275 on it, which compared to most of the other energy weapons is a substantial amount of health, besides maybe like the hollow rifle here, which is pretty durable too. Or infinitely durable. Then we got the Recharger Rifle. Recharger Rifle I'm going to put into F tier. This one's a pretty bad weapon. It's not unusable, but it does low damage per shot, and in the early game it's actually pretty decent if you can get one. It's just it's very heavy, and pretty much every other laser rifle trumps this. Even laser pistols or energy weapon pistols trump this. So the recharge is kind of slow, the damage isn't the best, it doesn't hold the most amount of shots, it's very heavy. Again, in the early game it's fine, but later on it does fall off pretty hard, especially once you can get like a laser rifle, which is just a straight upgrade to it. Then we got the Tri-Beam Laser. This one's going to go up in A tier. This one is the Shotgun Laser Rifle. This one does high damage per second, but it does break very fast. Then we have the unique version of it, or sorry, the modded version of it. This one's going to go all the way up into S tier. This one holds even more shots. It doesn't break as fast and does even more damage. This thing is crazy at close range if you want a close range energy weapon shotgun. I think this one's better than the multi-plas rifle once you have them both kind of tricked out. Well, you can't trick this one out, but you can trick this one out, which is pretty cool. And then we got the Arc Welder. Arc Welder is another F tier weapon. This one does low damage. It does extra damage towards robots, but it's not super useful in that role because you could take something like the Pulse Gun, which is way more powerful than this. This one does low damage per second. It's just not a very powerful weapon unless you want to grab it from Lonesome Road right away and then run immediately to Old World Blues, because then it can be kind of useful there, but in any other situation you can have better stuff than this. Flamer's pretty decent. Flamer, I would say, is probably like B tier. It can clear up things pretty fast. It can do pretty good damage per second. With Pyromaniac, it actually can do a decent amount of damage on top of that. As long as you have Flamer fuel, it's really good against non-armored enemies, and it can be pretty good in a fire build. Cleansing Flame is a bit better. I'd say this one's, maybe I wouldn't put it up into A tier. I think I'd put this one into B tier too. It's better than a regular Flamer, but not that much better. And the regular Flamer can have a larger tank with a mod, which is kind of cool. Cleansing Flame has a different colored flame and does more damage with the burn over time, but less damage on the direct hit of the flame. So, or maybe I'm getting that backwards. It's one of the two. Cleansing Flame's kind of a little bit better than the Flamethrower though, but they're both pretty decent. Gatling Laser is incredibly strong. Gatling Laser is going to go up into A tier. This one does a lot of damage per second. Not very much damage per shot, but it holds a lot of rounds to it. And it can just kind of rip through just about everything. It's actually one of my favorite energy weapons. It also looks really cool. Modded Gatling Lasers going all the way up into S tier. This one's even better. It has even more damage on it, as well as it can drop some weight thanks to the carbon fiber frame that it has. And this one's really good. This one's probably one of the best heavy weapons in the game just for fighting just about anything. The Unique Gatling Laser, the Spurtlewood, this one I'm going to say is A tier. I don't think this one's as strong as the modified version of it. It does shoot out green lasers that do more damage per shot, but it has less shots overall, which makes it so you're not going through ammo quite as quick. But it does make it so your sustained fire is much less than the modified Gatling Laser. I think that's where the Gatling Laser really shines, is just that high amount of continuous fire against basically everything. Then we've got the Incinerator. I'd put this one up into B tier. This one's pretty good. This one's similar to the Flamer, but this one you can lob towards enemies, so it'll do more damage at a distance, but less damage up close than something like the Flamer will. Still affected by the Pyromaniac perk. You can get this actually pretty early on, and it's pretty good for dealing with most things early on, as long as you got the fuel. Heavy Incinerator is just an upgrade. I'd say that one's A tier. This one actually does pretty well at long range, and if you built for a fire build, it actually does pretty well. It's almost like a fire grenade launcher a lot of the time, and I mean, that feels pretty good to use. Plasma Caster's pretty solid. I'm going to put this one up into A tier. This one's pretty nice. Does good damage per shot. Kind of shoots a little bit slow. If you mod it, that's a whole lot better, though, and I think that's the best version of it. But yeah, Plasma Caster is pretty nice. It's also based off of the plasma rifle from the original Fallout games. This is what it used to look like, so that's pretty awesome. It's a heavier weapon in this, and it weighs a lot more. This one still uses the same amount of ammo, one shot every time that you shoot it, but it only holds like 10 rounds in it. The modified Plasma Caster is really good. I'm going to put this one up into S tier. This is another one of the best heavy weapons, or heavy energy weapons. Does high damage per shot, shoots pretty fast thanks to its upgrades. So that's actually really good. Then we've got the Smitty Special. This one is probably also going to be A tier. This one shoots faster than a regular Plasma Caster, and it holds more rounds. This one's also full auto, so you can just hold it down, which is nice. But the modified version of the Plasma Caster, I think, is still stronger than it, since it does a lot more damage per shot. It's better for hitting crits. This one's not the best for hitting crits, but it's still a fun weapon overall. Tesla Cannon's pretty good. Tesla Cannon, I would say, is probably like A tier. This one's nice. It does high damage per second, has long range. Uses the electronic charge pack, so it's a little bit unique with that. Maybe not the best use of it because you got the Gatling Laser here too, but if you do get a Tesla Cannon, it can actually do a lot. It just breaks pretty quick. Then you've got the unique versions of the Tesla Cannon with Elijah's Jury Rig Tesla Cannon. I think this one's the best one out of them. I'd probably also put it up into A tier. Does more damage. I think this one breaks a little bit quicker though. But this one costs one more ammo per shot from it too, so that kind of makes up for the damage. The Baton Cannon, I'd also probably put up into A tier. These are all pretty comparable to one another. It just depends on what you want, because some of them break a little bit faster, some of them do a little bit more damage, some of them cost a little bit more ammo, some of them cost a little bit less ammo. Just find the one that you like. They're all pretty comparable to one another, though. They're all solid A tier weapons. They're all really nice. Then we've got the 25mm APW. This one I would say is also A tier. This one's really good as a general purpose weapon for an explosives build. 25mm are super common, does good damage per second, and clears out areas really fast. The unique version of it, the modified version, is going to go all the way up into S tier. This one is really strong. You get a drum mag on it, you get faster rate of fire, and you get longer range with it. It's probably one of the best general purpose explosive weapons for an explosive build. Fat Man I'd say is like B tier, same with Esther. I'm going to put both into B tier. These are absolutely devastating weapons, but they can backfire and kill you really easily. Indoors, these are really hard to use unless you're using the timed explosives. Outdoors, these ones can be really strong, so long as you're on like an elevated position dropping down onto enemies. The Fat Man are really powerful. Grenade machine gun, all the way up into A tier. This one is a very, very solid explosive general purpose weapon, similar to the APW. These are kind of difficult to find. They're fairly rare to find, but they kill things even better because you have even more shots than this. They aren't as handy as the APW, though. I tend to use that over the grenade machine gun, but they're very comparable overall. Modded version is also going to go up into S tier. Even the 25mm is incredibly powerful. The mods that you get for it are really good. And if you wanted to have a heavy weapon instead of a light weapon, I would take that over the APW. And then we've got Mercy. Mercy's also going to go up into S tier. Only problem with getting Mercy is that it's in probably the most fortified location in the entire wasteland, because you have to go into Deadwind Cavern, which is a small cavern, and it's full of death claws. But once you get this, it's incredibly powerful. It's a 40mm instead of a 25mm, which is arguably easier to find. Does more damage per second. Has a crazy high crit modifier, apparently, but it does no crit damage like most of the explosive weapons. Can be actually really good. Next up, we got the grenade launcher. Grenade launcher is probably like C tier. This one's pretty decent, although it does have a slow pump every time that you shoot it, and I find it a little bit more awkward than something like the grenade rifles. They're generally my go-tos, whereas this one is just not quite as good. Regular grenade rifle, I think I'd put up into B tier. This one's pretty nice. It has a single shot, but it's a very powerful single shot. Does high damage, has good explosion range. The one mod that it gets is pretty nice too, which the modified version I'd say is a bit higher, probably up in A tier. This one gives it a longer barrel, so it has more velocity, so you have longer range, which is really important for a weapon like this. Really good for breaking up crowds, really good for engaging a fight, or really good for finishing a fight. The grenade rifles are really nice for that. Then we have all the modified versions of it, so let's do the Mercenaries grenade launcher first. This one you can get right at the very start. This is basically the same as the regular grenade rifle, so I'd also put it up into B tier. Has lower stat requirements though, and you do get a bunch of 40mm grenades with it. You can also modify this one with the barrel on it, so that's pretty nice. The regular grenade rifle and the modified version of it, as well as all the other versions besides the mercenary one, is affected by the grunt perk too. So this one is worse as the game goes on. Once you have that perk, then the regular grenade rifle is going to be better. But up until that point, the mercenary's grenade rifle is going to be pretty much on par with it, maybe a little bit better. Then we have the Great Bear rifle, the Red Victory rifle. These two are the rifles that you can get from either bombing the NCR or bombing Caesar's Legion at the end of the Lonesome Road. You do need to go to the respective areas to pick these up. These ones are also pretty similar. I think it's the Red Victory rifle that has slightly better crits. I think it's one of the best weapons for an explosive crit build, where it's still pretty bad. But I'm going to put these both up into B tier. They're both good. It's just by the time you're getting them, you can have like pretty much any other weapon in the game. So they're not really worth it to actually go through all of the divide, complete it, and then just go to get these. They're not the most satisfying endgame weapons. They're decent overall, but they're not the most satisfying. Thump Thump is actually, I would say, more satisfying. This one you can go pick up at the Boomer's place, and this one's all the way up into S tier. This one is fantastic. Whoops. This one does high damage per second. This one shoots faster than a regular grenade rifle. It has the tube already on it, so it has longer range than one. It has the same weight, I believe, and the 40mm is actually pretty versatile on the types of ammo that you get. So Thump Thump is fantastic as an overall, just general purpose explosive weapon. Then we've got the missile launcher, which I'm going to say this one's probably up into A tier. This one's pretty nice. It does high damage. The mods for it are pretty good. And if you find missiles, then this one can work pretty much as like an explosive sniper rifle, especially if you have the high velocity missiles, then they move super fast. Annabelle, I think, is one of the best explosive weapons in the game, and I'd probably put this one also up into A tier. This one, or sorry, S tier. This one's even better than the regular missile launcher, has better stats. Main downside is getting this. You have to go to Black Mountain to get it, and there is a super mutant that has it. Sometimes it can fall through the floor. Sometimes it can get lost if you can't find the body easily from them. And this will be used against you as well, which is kind of a downside. But aside from that, it's all just upsides from the regular missile launcher. It also weighs less too, which is good. Then we've got the Red Glare. Red Glare is pretty solid. I'd put this one up into A tier. It's pretty nice. The rockets are good. You find these in a couple places around the divide. They are very expensive to mod if you would like to mod them out, but it can be a pretty solid weapon. They also do very low friendly fire damage, so it's kind of hard to blow yourself up with the Red Glare. The modified version of it's even better, but I'd still probably keep it up into A tier. It's not substantially better. You can put 3 mods on this. You even get an achievement for doing that, and it's going to cost you a lot of caps to do that. But it is a very solid overall explosive weapon for the most part. Then we got regular sticks of dynamite. Regular sticks of dynamite I'd put into D tier. These ones are just very awkward to use. They have a set fuse on them. They do decent damage. You can get quite a few of them early on, and you can use them in some recipes, but using them by themselves are a little bit strange. Fire bombs, I think, are F tier. They're probably one of the worst explosives in the game. They don't even break on impact like you would assume from a Molotov. These ones actually have a fuse on them similar to the dynamite, but they have a much smaller explosion radius. The fire on them is kind of cool, and they are affected by Pyromaniac, but they're still just really not worth it. Flashbangs are probably also going to go to F tier. These just are really awkward to use. They also work on you to where they can lower your overall damaging skills. They don't really stun enemies. If you throw enough of them at enemies, they do, but they're just so awkward to actually get to use, so they're not really the best. Regular frag grenades, I'd actually move probably up into B tier. They're a solid all-around explosive weapon. They're going to be one of the most common thrown explosives that you find. They do good damage. They have a good explosion radius. They're pretty nice. The Holy Hand Grenades are going all the way up into S tier. These things are absolutely hilarious when you get them. You only get 3 in total, though, and you need the Wild Wasteland perk or trait to get them. And they just blow up like mini nukes, so they're hilarious in a lot of ways, but with 3 of them, they're not super practical for you to be using. Incendiary grenades are going to go all the way up into A tier. These are really good. These are basically like frag grenades plus fire on top of them, so that's really nice. And the only problem with these is that they're fairly rare. It's actually really difficult to get a lot of these to use them effectively. Long fuse dynamite, I'm going to say is D tier. It's worse than regular dynamite, but it's still usable. It still does the same amount of damage as regular dynamite. It's just this one has a much longer fuse. I think regular dynamite has a 5-second fuse, and this is like a 15-second fuse. So it takes even longer to go off. The MFC grenade I'd probably put up into B tier. This one's a solid one that you can make with the Mad Bomber perk, and it does good damage. You can make them dirt cheap. They only take microfusion cells to make, so you don't need to invest anything else into them. And they do good damage. They're basically like plasma grenades, but less damaging. Nuka grenades are probably going to go up into S tier. These ones you can make too. They do really high damage. They don't cost all that much to make them, and they're just very satisfying to use. They also do some fire damage. Plasma grenades are going to go up into A tier. They're just an upgrade from regular frag grenades, but they can do more damage to you too. So when they're thrown at you, they're pretty scary, but when you're throwing them at the enemies, they're also pretty scary for them. Pulse grenades are either F tier or a little bit higher up. Maybe I'd put these into D tier too. Pulse grenades don't do like anything towards regular enemies, but towards the robots they do more damage. It's just robots aren't very common in New Vegas. Tin grenades are pretty good. I'm going to put these into C tier. They're nice alternatives to frag grenades. You can make a lot of them early on, especially if you have Mad Bomber. They're really good. They're all around just a decent overall explosive weapon that you can just throw at kind of whatever. Bottle cap mines are going to go all the way up into S tier. These are one of the best placed explosives. They do high damage. They don't cost too much to make. Mad Bomber makes them even more efficient, and they scale really well with explosive perks. Then we've got C4. C4 is probably also going to go up into S tier or A tier. Yeah, probably S tier. This one's really good. You do need the detonator in order to use it. It does do really high damage, and they can be really good on certain quests. They can also be really good for setting ahead of time where you know enemies are going to run towards you. Set this off, do massive damage to them, and that works really well in just about any build. You don't even need to build explosives, and C4 can do a lot to them. Demolition charges, I'm going to say, are like C tier. They're worse frag mines for all intents and purposes. Frag mines are pretty good. These ones you get at the Sierra Madre. You can also buy them too, and I think they weigh a little bit more. Fat mines are probably going to go to D tier. They're just not really the best. They're not that practical. They're like a mini nuke mine, so they do tons of damage, but when you actually toss them out, you really have to get far away. Otherwise, you will blow yourself up with these. Frag mines are going to go up into B tiers. They're pretty much the equivalent of frag grenades. They're going to be the most common one that you find. You can place them down. You can cripple limbs. They're really good for setting ahead of time when you know enemies are going to rush towards you, especially like melee enemies. Then they're really strong. Gas bombs are like D tier as well. Gas bombs just kind of suck. They take a lot to make. They do okay damage. They do have fire on them, which is kind of cool, but I don't think they're affected by the Pyromaniac perk, and they weigh a lot. They're also kind of one of those weird thrown-placed explosives to where they just are strange to exist in general. MFC clusters are easy S tier. This is one of the best explosives in the game, one of the best weapons in the game. Does tons of damage. This is just a cluster grenade you chuck out and will blow up on anything that it hits, or it'll hit the ground and spread these out. If you go pick them up, then you get the regular microfusion grenades, but these ones do tons and tons of damage. They're also just super fun to watch as they go off. Plasma mines are going to go up into A tier. Basically the same as plasma grenades, just you place them and they do more damage. These are powder charges. Powder charges are also going to go to C tier. They're like the same as the tin grenade, but you place them down. You can get a whole lot of these at the start from the powder gangers. Just go pick them up or disarm them and then pick them up, and then you got a pretty decent placed explosive. Not quite as good as frag mines, but pretty close to them. Pulse mines, another D tier weapon. This one, again, it's good against robots, but I think the pulse grenades are a little bit better in that role, and there's just not a whole lot of robots. And then satchel charges are fantastic. Satchel charges are going to go probably up into A tier or S tier. I think A tier. These ones you can make. They do tons of damage. They're basically just better placed explosives than most of them, besides maybe like the bottle cap mine and the C4. Still really good placed explosives though, and they don't take very much to make. You don't even need to be very high level to make these. They also blend in with just about everything, so in the Lonesome Road they're actually very scary. Then we got the Time Bomb, regular, and the high yield. I'm going to put both these into F tier. I think that they are very, very awkward to use. They're not so bad if you just want to reverse pickpocket people and put these into their pockets. Then they're actually pretty solid. They do a lot of damage and it gives you plenty of time to run away. But these things have 15-second fuses on them by default, which is even more awkward than something like the long fuse dynamite. You have to set them down and then you just have to hope that enemies run into them or get an enemy's attention and then have them run towards it and hope that you have your timing right. Or you have to set them down and then wait for an enemy to get close and then shoot them. That's another way to do it. That's a little bit more consistent, but if you're just using them by themselves, they are very, very inconsistent. And then we've got Bowie knives, which is a Bowie knife, not a Bowie knife, because of Jim Bowie and not David Bowie. Talked about that in the other video. So the Bowie knife is going to go up into A tier. This is a very solid melee weapon. It is really good. It does a lot of damage per second. You can sneak it into places. The unique version of a Blood Nap is S tier. I think this is one of the best one-handed melee weapons in the game. Does really high damage, attacks really fast, you can sneak it into areas, it gives you bonus sneak as well, so that's all really cool. You do have to go to the Courier's Mile in order to get it, and you have to pull it out of a light post, but once you know that, once you know where it is, it's very good. Bumper Sword's pretty solid. Bumper Sword's probably a B tier. This one does good damage per second. It's a two-handed weapon, so taking Super Slam helps you knock down enemies. Looks really cool too. It's just a really fun melee weapon that a lot of the super mutants have. Blade of the East is going to go up into S tier, as well as Blade of the West is going to go up into S tier as well. These are really cool weapons. Blade of the East you sadly don't get to use very much, because the Legate has it, and you're only going to be able to use it on the very, very end of the game against just the last couple enemies. Blade of the West you can pick up from the Marksmen and the Lonesome Road, and that one does similar damage and has really good crits. It doesn't have the knockback like the Blade of the East has, but it does have damage over time, so if you want a more usable version, go with the Blade of the West. Blade of the East is pretty much just as strong as it, but you will need to spawn it in. Chainsaw is pretty strong. Chainsaw is going to go up into A tier as well. This one does high damage per second. It ignores armor. So that's really nice. It does weigh a lot, and these aren't always the easiest to find, but chainsaws are pretty good. Modified Chainsaw is going to go all the way up into S tier. This one is really strong. You can get 3 mods for this, where you get better teeth, you get an improved motor, and you get lightweight parts to it. So it doesn't weigh very much. You can actually cut this thing's weight down quite a lot. And the Modified Chainsaw actually is really good for particularly a melee tank build. Chainsaw's really nice for that. Cleaver's alright. Cleaver's probably going to be into C tier. It's okay. It has good item durability. It does okay damage. It's just kind of okay all the way around. Nothing way crazy, but it's just sort of alright. Chopper's going to go up to B tier, I think. It's a little bit better. It does a little bit more damage per second, and you can get it super early on, so that's kind of nice. It's nothing way crazy compared to other melee weapons, but it's alright. Combat Knife is going to go up into A tier, similar to the Bowie Knife, where it does pretty good at everything. It has low item health, but other than that, it has good damage per second. You can sneak it into areas, so it's actually pretty nice. It's also very lightweight. Chance's Knife is going to go all the way up into S tier. You can get this right away. It has bonus crits on it. This one and the Combat Knives are affected by both Grunt and by Cowboy, so you can have even more damage and damage per second from it. It's like a super easy top tier weapon that you can get right at the very start of the game, so very nice. You just need a shovel to get it. Cosmic Knife's decent too. I would say this one's also C tier. It's got okay item HP, it's got bonus limb damage, it does okay damage and damage per second. You find this in Dead Money all over the place. The Cosmic Knife cleaned is better. I would say that this one's probably up into B tier. This one's decent because it has a better VATS attack. It does more crits, or it has more crit chance on it, and it just has overall more damage. Super Heated Knife is going to also go into B tier. This one I don't think is affected by Pyromaniac, or maybe it is, I don't recall. Either way, it doesn't get a whole lot of damage from that. It does a little bit more damage over time. Fire Axe is a solid A tier weapon. It's a really good melee weapon overall. It's got good damage, it's got long reach. Just all around really solid. They also sell for a lot of money too, so that's really nice. Knock Knock I'm going to put up into S tier. This is one of my favorite melee weapons. It's a nice reference to both The Shining and the American Psycho, so I love those two movies. Knock Knock is really fun. It's very difficult to get though, because sometimes the quest sort of bugs out and you can't get it, And it's also just in a very weird location in order for you to get, since you have to get to the fire station in Searchlight, which means you have to do part of a quest in order to get there, or get the key from the guy there. And then you find it in a bathroom stall. And this one does good damage per second. It also just looks really cool. It's a really nice melee weapon. Hatchets are kind of okay. I'd probably put them on C tier too. They're fine. You get more damage from the Cowboy perk, which is cool. They are fairly durable, but they're very rare. Sometimes you can find them on Fiends, but that's about it. Katana's pretty good. Katana, I would say, is probably A tier. This one's pretty nice. It does good damage per second. It has a very, very strong VATS attack, and you can buy these pretty easily from vendors. Unique version is probably one of the best one-handed melee weapons, and I put this one up into S tier. Sadly, you can't sneak this into areas, but you do get a whole bunch of bonuses to this, where you get the sheath, the handle, and the blade on it, where it does more damage, it attacks faster, and it also has more durability. It's all around a very solid melee weapon, and not a super heavy melee weapon, so if you want something a bit more powerful than like the knife, but maybe not as clunky as some of the big two-handed weapons, you might go with that. Knife is going to go to D tier. It's not a great weapon, doesn't have the best stats overall, but it's okay for the start. Knife Spear is also okay. I'd put this one into C tier, and the Clean Knife Spear also into C tier. These are okay two-handed melee weapons, but they're not one of the strongest. They knock down enemies fairly well if you have Super Slam. They attack reasonably fast, and at least the Clean Knife Spear does have extra crit chance, as well as they do have extra limb damage, so those are kind of nice. Machete is also probably going to go to D tier. It's just not a great melee weapon compared to some of the other ones you can get early on, but it's okay overall. Broad Machete is going to be C tier. You can start out with this. It looks a whole lot better, and it has higher stats than like the Machete, but it still can break pretty quick. Liberator is a bit better. I'd probably put this one up into... yeah, I'd put it into C tier as well. This one you can also kill enemies fairly quick with. It has bonus crits on it, which is nice. Has extra limb damage, but still has lower overall stats. And the Machete Gladius I'd probably put up into B tier. It's not bad, but you can get some other melee weapons that are better than this one. I do like the kukri look from it though, so that is really cool. Aside from that though, you can still kind of do better than any of the machetes most of the time. Proton Axe is going to be A tier. This one is just a better regular axe. It has very similar stats to the axe, but it does extra damage towards robots, so that's really nice. And the Protonic Inverse Axe is even better than that, so I'd put this one up into S tier. This one's similar to Knock Knock. Does even more damage per second, still attacks very fast. It's a very nice melee weapon. The Ripper's kind of an awkward one for me, but I'm going to put the Ripper into C tier. Ignores armor, does pretty good damage per second, does pretty decent damage per hit. Modified version I would say is better, and I put this one up into B tier. I think this is just kind of a weaker version of the chainsaw. Some might disagree with me on that, because you can at least carry this around a lot easier. It doesn't weigh you down as much. But I find the chainsaw just to be a whole lot better, and like the thermic lance to be a whole lot better of weapons similar to this. Shish Kebab is pretty strong. This one is going to go all the way up into A tier. I think it's pretty good. Does high damage. Does do good damage per second. Also light things on fire. With Pyromaniac, it does even more damage. And then we got the unique version Guyana, or Gahina, however the heck you say this one. This one is probably up into S tier as well. This one's a good melee weapon. It's similar to the Katana. With Pyromaniac, it's pretty strong. If you don't have Pyromaniac, it's not quite as good as some of the other melee weapons we've talked about, and the flames over time effect can do pretty decent damage per second. So it's another good option if you want to do that for melee. Straight Razor is probably going to go down to D tier. It's not a great weapon, but it's okay. It's something you can get early on, and it has bonus crits, but aside from that, it's nothing special. Figaro is quite a bit better. I'd put this one up into B tier. And this one has much higher crits, although it still breaks fairly fast. You can't get this right as you go to New Vegas, though, and you talk to the king, so that's kind of nice. Then we've got the Switchblade. Switchblade is also another D tier. It does low damage. It's okay. It's part of one of the quests, too, for killing Deathclaws with it. And it's actually not a bad weapon for that, since it is a melee weapon. But the Switchblade is not really one of the greatest one-handed melee weapons. Thermic Lance is going to go all the way up into S tier. This one does a lot of damage per second, and it ignores armor on top of all of that, so it's really good. It also seems to have really long reach, longer reach than like the chainsaw. I'm not actually sure if it has longer reach than the chainsaw, but it seems like it does. 9-iron is okay. 9-iron I would say is like probably another C tier weapon. It's a two-handed melee weapon, which is good, but it breaks super fast and it just kind of does okay damage. It's nothing way crazy, but you can get it early on. Nephi's Golf Driver, I would put a tier higher up into B tier. Has bonus crit damage and has better damage, and it actually has a little bit better item health, but it does break really fast still. so I wouldn't really use this one too often, but if you get it early on, it's not bad, and it is very lightweight. Regular baseball bat's actually pretty decent. I'd put the regular baseball bat up into B tier. This one has okay damage. It has okay damage per second. It has very high durability, so all of those are pretty good for an early game melee weapon. The unique version of it, or at least the modded version of the baseball bat, is really solid. I'd put this one up into A tier. You can put spikes on this, you can have a better core on it so it attacks faster, and you can have better durability on it so it takes forever to break this thing. You can also buy this from vendors super cheap early on. So the baseball bat modded out is actually really, really solid. Cattle prod is going to go to F tier. Cattle prod's pretty bad. This one does low damage. It's supposed to be a non-lethal weapon, but it doesn't even work very well for that because it inflicts fatigue damage. Fatigue damage does make it so you can knock down enemies, and once they're knocked out, they're a lot easier to beat up on, but since you can kill them a lot of the time before you actually knock them down, the cattle prod is just in an awkward spot. Dress cane's okay. I'm going to put this one into C tier. It's got decent damage and decent damage per second, as well as you can sneak it in, and it is kind of fancy. Just it breaks pretty quick, and it's not as solid as other melee weapons. Lead pipe's pretty decent too. I'm also going to put that one into C tier. It actually has pretty good damage and pretty good damage per second, and you can sneak it in, but it does break really fast too. So early on, these actually aren't bad to get because lead pipes are super common. The Humble Cudgel, the unique version of the lead pipe, I'd put a tier higher up into B tier. You can find this in the sewers. It does more damage per second. It's actually one of my favorite melee weapons, but it's still not really one of the best ones. You can find better ones than this along the way, especially if you want to run and grab Chance's knife or even Figaro in this case. They might be a little bit more accessible. Nail board is going to go to D tier. This one's pretty bad. It's a melee weapon that you really shouldn't be using. It doesn't have high item health. It doesn't really have high damage. It is still a two-handed melee weapon, which is kind of nice, but it's definitely on the weaker end of two-handed melee weapons. Pool Q is probably the worst two-handed melee weapon in the game. It has very low item health, very low damage. Can't hit crits very well. Doesn't hit very hard crits. Mostly, you're just going to be using the pool cue for repair fodder with jury rigging. Old Glory, on the other hand, is the unique version of the pool cue. This is a Ulysses personal weapon, and I'd put this one up into S tier. This one's actually really solid. This one attacks fast, does good damage, has really good crits, has a pretty good unique VATS attack to it, or the same VATS attack that like the baseball bat has with Grand Slam. So really high damage. The pool cue also has that. It's just it has low stats around, so it's not as good. Police baton is going to go to D tier as well, or maybe F tier. It's pretty bad. I guess it's not as bad as the cattle prod. Does low damage across the board. It attacks kind of fast, but that's really the only thing it has going for it. Rebar club's pretty decent. I'd put this one up into C tier. You can find these around the Repcon facility. The Nightkins tend to have them. They do actually do pretty good damage per hit, but they attack kind of slow and they're kind of heavy. So they're not going to be as good as other hammers, but they're not one of the worst ones. Nuka Breaker is the unique version of this, weirdly enough. You can buy this in Freeside. This one I'd say is B tier. This one is better. It does more damage, but it still attacks kind of slow. It does look really cool, though. I do like the look of this one quite a bit. Then we got the Rolling Pin. This one's also going to go to F tier. This is more of a meme weapon. It does low damage per second, has short reach, breaks very fast. The Rolling Pin is just not a very good weapon overall. It does kind of get carried by melee perks in general, but that's with sort of all melee. Shovel's going to go to C tier. This one's pretty good. It has a 3x crit modifier. It does do good crit damage. You can get this super early on. You can also use it to dig up graves, so you can get Chance's knife and a couple other potentially decent weapons from it. Still being a two-handed weapon and having really high item health does help for the start too, but it will fall off, especially if you can get like a baseball bat early on. Then that one's pretty nice. Sledgehammer is also probably like a C tier weapon. It's got decent damage, but it attacks fairly slow. It's kind of awkward. It doesn't break really that quick though, so the Sledgehammer's just kind of okay. Super Sledge, I'm going to say, is A tier. This one's super solid, does good damage per second. It does weigh quite a bit, and it kind of breaks a little bit quicker than what you would think, but you can kill things with it super fast. The unique version, Oh Baby, is going to go all the way up into S tier. I think this is one of the best melee weapons as well. It hits really hard. You can get this pretty early on too if you know where to rush to get it. Tire Iron. Tire Iron's not really that great. I'd also put this one D tier. It does okay. It has decent item health. Average stats all the way around. Not really anything way impressive for a lot of the melee weapons. War Club is pretty decent. War Club, I would say, is B tier. This one attacks fairly fast. You can sneak it in. It's affected by the Cowboy perk. It does good damage per second, so all of those are good. Modified War Club is going to go up into A tier. One of my favorite melee weapons in the entire game. It looks really cool. It attacks really fast, and you can really bully enemies with like Super Slam with it, so that's really good. I don't find it quite as good as some of the other one-handed melee weapons. Like, I don't find it quite as strong as like the Katana or like Blood Nap or Chance's knife, but still a pretty solid all-around melee weapon. And then we got the X2 Antenna. This is actually pretty good too. I'm actually going to put this one up into A tier. It hits pretty hard. It does extra EMP damage. It's very similar to a proton axe, just it swings a bit slower, but it does hit a bit harder, so kind of a toss-up between them. Then we got throwing weapons. First up are the proton axes. These ones I'm going to say are like B tier. They do pretty good damage, and they do extra damage towards robots, which is cool. You can find a bunch of them. We have the inverse axes, which I'm also going to put into B tier. These ones are better, but you only have a limited amount of them, and you probably won't be using them a whole lot, so they're not always the most useful. We have throwing axes. I'm going to put these C tier. I think these are weaker than the other throwing axes, but they are still really fun to use. They do good damage. They have extra limb damage on them. They are more heavy than some of the other thrown melee weapons, though. Throwing knives, I'm also going to put C tier. They do pretty good damage, and you can actually sneak these in, but throwing knives are extremely rare, so good luck getting enough of them to actually sneak into an area to get any use of them. They are really, really fun if you spawn a bunch of them in, though. Throwing knife spears are pretty decent. I'm going to put these B tier as well. They are one of the more practical weapons that you can get in dead money. They do have extra limb damage on them, so you can kill the ghost people with them without too much trouble. Throwing spears, I think, are the best throwing weapon in the game, and I'd put these up into A tier. They are the most consistent and the easiest to get throwing weapon, because Caesar's Legion tends to have these, and these do a lot of damage when you do hit with them. But you do have to get good at throwing them because you can't pick these up after you've tossed them, so make them count when you are throwing them. And then we've got tomahawks. Tomahawks are probably also going to go up into B tier. They're a decent throwing weapon. They do okay damage. They are affected by the Cowboy perk. Same with the throwing axes are too, which is nice. These ones, you can find quite a lot of them in Zion, so they're a little bit more useful than like throwing axes overall, but they're still a little bit awkward to be using. Then we move on to unarmed, where we've got quite a few. So we got the ballistic fist. This one's going to go all the way up into S tier. This one does a lot of damage per second. These are fairly rare, but you can take them off of Caesar's Legion guards, so that's nice. Two-step goodbye is actually a little bit weaker, and I'm going to put this into A tier. This one does... Oh, whoop. Sorry, I didn't even take this one all the way up to S tier. This one's going to go to A tier. Two-step goodbye is kind of weird, because whenever you kill something with it, you put a bomb on it, and then it can explode, and it can deal damage back to you. I don't find it as consistent as the regular ballistic glove, but it still does a lot of damage per hit, so it's kind of nice there. Bear Trap Fist, I would say, is C tier. This one's decent. It's actually probably S tier for dead money, because of how easy it is to kill the ghost people with it. Outside of dead money, though, it's not nearly as strong. It does still have decent item health, and there is a mod that you can put on this to give it more damage, but it's still going to be kind of an awkward one outside of that DLC. Then we've got the Bladed Gauntlet, which I'm also going to say is C tier, and the Cram Opener, which I'm also going to put into C tier. These ones are heavy, they do decent damage, and they do decent damage per second. They also have good crits, but they're just kind of awkward. The Cram Opener you can get from Little Buster once you find him dead in Freeside later on after you've completed the Fiend's Quest, or you can kill him and take it off of him. Either one works there. And the Bladed Gauntlet, even though it's not bad early on because of the item health and the damage that it does, it's still not one of the best early game just unarmed weapons. Boxing gloves I'm going to say are D tier. They're still usable because you can knock out enemies pretty fast with them, which is nice, but they're a little bit awkward to be using and they don't do the most damage per hit. The golden gloves I'm also going to put into D tier, even though these ones are a lot better, and if you just want to be knocking out enemies, especially on a pacifist run, these are actually super fun, but they don't kill as fast as other unarmed weapons. Boxing tape, I'm also going to put this one into C tier. This one's actually pretty decent. It has really high item health, and I think it's a little bit better than boxing gloves, but it's still mostly just to knock out enemies or to beat up on enemies early on, so it's okay. The brass knuckles I'm also going to put up into C tier. These are fantastic for the early game. They have a lot of item health, they do a lot of damage, they're probably one of the best early game unarmed or melee weapons. I really enjoy using these, but they will fall off later compared to some of the other ones. Displacer glove is pretty solid. I'm going to put this one up into A tier. This one does a lot of damage and it doesn't have very high strength requirements. Caesar also has one of these, which is kind of cool, so you can take his and use that one if you would like. And then the unique version Pushy is really good. I'm going to put this one up into S tier. This one is one of the best unarmed weapons because it requires only like 2 strength to use and then 100 unarmed. You can get this right away if you want to run up to the Ruby Hill Mine and just run through the Lake Larks or kill the Lake Larks and take it. Does a lot of damage per second. I think you can sneak this one in too. I think you can sneak a lot of melee and unarmed weapons in. I'm not sure about Pushy now. I usually don't have that, but either way. Then we have the Dog Tag Fist. This one's decent. I'm going to put this one into D tier. It's not as strong as like Brass Knuckles, and you have to go out of your way just to get it, so it's not really worth getting because you need to get the dog tags to actually make it, as well as you need to get the recipe, which is on the other side of the map from where you start. So it's quite a trek just to get something like this. Then we have the Recompense of the Fallen. I always get that one mixed up in name. I don't know why I say Recompensance of the Fallen, but this is the Recompense of the Fallen. This one you get at the Legion camp. This one is better. I'd put this one up into C tier. You can get this one pretty early on. It's got good stats all the way around. It's pretty much on par with Brass Knuckles, although it doesn't have as much item durability as Brass Knuckles, so I still don't use it that much. Fist of Rar is up next, or the Fist of the North Rar, if you have the Wild Wasteland. This one's going to go all the way up into S tier. This is Deathclaw Gauntlet. It does high damage per second. That's still A tier. And it also can be snuck into Dead Money. If you just get the Hand of Rar and you take that into Dead Money, then you go to a workbench, then you can craft it into the Fist of Rar, since the hand counts as a quest item, so the casino can't take it away from you. Then you have the strongest weapon in Dead Money, because you can just rip through everything. This thing has really good crits on it, too. It's really nice. Industrial Hand is up next, and this one's kind of weird. I'm going to put this B tier. It actually does a lot of damage and damage per second, as well as it ignores armor, but it feels very awkward to use this, and it's super awkward to use this in VATS. I would really recommend you don't use this in VATS. But being able to ignore armor is really good. It's similar to the Ripper, though, where it just feels awkward to me, and I don't use it that often. It is a little bit better than the Ripper, though. Even the modified Ripper, I would say it's better, but I would still say it's a step down from, like, the Chainsaw. Mantis Gauntlet is pretty good. I'm going to put this one up into C tier. This one's actually pretty nice. It does high damage, and this one also ignores armor, which is good. These are kind of rare to find, though. The Embrace the Mantis King is fantastic, though, and I'd put this one actually higher up into A tier. This one has, I think, a 3x crit modifier on it. Does really high damage. It's fairly heavy for an unarmed weapon, though, but you can buy this at Mick and Ralph's, and it's probably one of the more underrated weapons in New Vegas. And then we got the Power Fist. Power Fist is like a solid B tier. It's actually a pretty decent unarmed weapon overall. You can sneak these in funny enough into, like, casinos. They do good damage, they have good damage per second, they can break kind of quick, but overall they're a pretty solid unarmed weapon. Modded versions is even better. I would say that this is a tier higher up into A tier. This one's actually really nice. You can attack faster with it, it's got more item health, and it's got more damage, everything that you would want in an unarmed weapon. So if you can modify the Power Fist, go ahead and do that, because it's actually pretty decent. Maybe not as good as Embrace the Mantis King, but still pretty good. Saturnite Fist is also pretty nice. I'd put this one also up in A tier. This one's very similar to the modified Power Fist in just about every way, and you can find these all over Old World Blue, so they're not very hard to get whatsoever. That's really nice. You can also modify them into the Saturnite Fist Superheated if you go talk to the Toaster, and this one's an easy S tier. This one is fantastic if you have the Pyromaniac perk. You can attack super quick. It has, I think, bonus crits on it, so that's good. It's just all around a really good unarmed or melee weapon. No, or really good for an unarmed or melee weapon build. It is an unarmed weapon. Greased Lightning is up next, and this one's also fantastic. This one I would also put up into S tier. This one is a faster attacking Power Fist. It does a little bit less damage, but man, it can just punch through just about everything. The attack speed on it is fantastic. You give this to, like, Veronica, and she'll just punch anything. Really, any of these, like the Ballistic Fist or Pushy or whatever you want to do, she will just destroy anybody with any of those unarmed weapons. Greased Lightning you need to buy from the Brotherhood, but it's pretty good. Then we've got Salt Upon Wounds Power Fist. I'm going to put this one up into the A tier as well. This one's better than a regular Power Fist, but not as good as some of the other Power Fists we've talked about. It's pretty good. It has extra damage over time. It has a good attack speed. It has good damage and good damage per second like all the Power Fists do, so it's overall pretty good. Then we have all the Scientist Glove, where the regular Scientist Glove, I'd say this is C tier. It's kind of okay. It's not anything crazy. The Corrosive Glove is in a similar position. It does do better because it does corrosive damage, which is kind of unique, but it doesn't do that much more damage per second. The Fire Glove is probably one of the best ones because Pyromaniac does affect it, so it actually gets a pretty decent damage boost on top of that, but still it's way less than the superheated Saturnite Fist, so you're still probably not going to be using it. Dr. Klein's Glove is okay as well. This one's actually pretty decent because of the bonus effect that it has on it, and you can get it right away, which is nice. So it does have better stats, but it's still a little bit awkward. Dr. Mobius is in a similar position where I'd also put this into B tier, where this one can cause Frenzy, and Frenzy is really good, at least against higher leveled enemies, since you can punch like a giant rat scorpion and basically have it on your side so it starts attacking stuff. That's actually pretty nice, and it has, I think, a 4x crit modifier on it, so it's actually pretty prone to hitting crits, which is good. Then we got Spike Knuckles. Spike Knuckles are just a straight upgrade over Brass Knuckles, so I'd put them into B tier. They are very good, especially early on. They have really high item health. They do really high damage. You can sneak them in anywhere. Love and Hate are one of the best signature weapons and one of my favorites. I'd put this up into A tier. These ones you can get right away at the start, as long as you go north of Good Springs and decide to fight the Raiders. You can sneak these into areas. They are all around very, very solid unarmed weapons, as well as they have very high item health too. And then we've got the Yao Kuai Gauntlet. I'm going to put the Yao Kuai Gauntlet into B tier. This one's pretty good. They do have decent damage per second, and they have a ton of item health. They take forever to break. I think the regular one has like 600 item health. They also ignore damage threshold, which is really nice. They're not quite as good as some of the other unarmed weapons, but still really good. Sheath's Embrace is even better. I'm going to put this one B tier as well, because this one has even more item health. It has like 900 item health. I think it has the most besides like the Industrial Hand for item health for any of the unarmed weapons. But this is a full auto weapon and this is not, so you're never going to break this. Still really good, but still kind of okay-ish stats all the way around. Zap Glove I'm also going to put into B tier. This one's pretty decent. Does extra damage towards robots and power armor. They're kind of rare to find, but they're pretty decent overall. And then we have the unique one, which is the Paladin Toaster, and I'd put this one up into A tier. This is more damage, better item health, and you can find this one right away. It's just over at Helios 1, or right next to Helios 1. You just got to go into a cave nearby, kill a super mutant, or maybe it's just on a body in there, and then you can get it, and you have an extremely powerful weapon too. And this is where I'd put all of the guns in Fallout New Vegas. So this is our complete modified list. This is going to be a lot shorter than the full list that I was planning. Like I said, the original list was going to be like 17 hours long, but hopefully I cut this one down to like an hour or 2 hours. If you want a full in-depth video on any of these, be sure to check them out because I do have compilations of all of these, so we go over all the stats. Tell me your thoughts on these weapons in Fallout New Vegas down in the comments below, and we are going to be doing something similar to this with Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 in the near future. So thank you guys so very much for watching this. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye bye everybody!